Presentation. Video call.
And without further ado, Mark you need an accessible web interface.
Excellent. Hi, yeah, I'm Mark Tinberg. I work in Do It Network Services. I've been there for about 15 years. And for the last 10 or so years, I've been the lead developer and maintainer for ANTS, the Authorized Agent Network Tool Suite. And we've just gone through a large refactoring to bring it in line with current web accessibility standards, as well as the look and feel of other UW web properties. Uh, so, accessibility, there's a lot of accessibility guides out there. And, every guide can tell you that you should put labels on form elements or add title attributes for explanations or instructions. Um, but there's a lot of HTML elements which are new or have been standardized since a lot of these web apps were built. And those things provide great functionality and have a lot of accessibility built in. As part of our refactor, I've kind of went with the theory that using built-in HTML elements that are supported by browsers is kind of the easiest way to get all the accessible behavior that the browser is able to provide, because all of that's just provided by the browser vendor without me having to layer on tons of specialized ARIA attributes and roles and other behavior to get that accessibility.
Slide. Our use case.
So this is an example of kind of our web app through the ages, from the original kind of ANTS, 2000s era HTML to kind of a 2010s era web design based on some of the UW theming to our current, based on UW Communications current theming guidelines.
Slide. Our technology.
So our technology stack, the actual code is entirely in Perl, Perl CGIs. Again, this app comes from the 2000s, and what we've rewritten that to use HTML5 features with CSS native features and a little bit of JavaScript for interactive features. We're not using any JavaScript frameworks, so we don't have a build process. It's not bringing in external code. We have no CDN that's required for it to work. All of the JavaScript is stuff that we were able to use from existing examples and standards that, again, is built into JavaScript APIs. We don't need jQuery. We don't need any of these other things for interactivity, which has been a great boon for us. And again, I think also it helps with accessibility and just maintainability.
Slide. The table.
So here's the things I'm going to go over is my new favorite HTML elements. So details and summary, field sets with legends, buttons with dialogue for pop-ups, input, all of the different input methods or input types that now exist that can do some amount of validation that used to be done by hooking on the onSubmit handler in JavaScript and trying to add additional error messages to things, which all of that is just not required anymore. Data lists and data attributes for kind of in-browser type ahead search and filtering and sorting.
Slide. Details and summary.
Yeah, so the first of my favorite elements here, details and summary. Kind of an example here on the right-hand side from some debug data. So it gives you an accordion panel or a panel that they can open and close to show additional information. And again, that gets announced by the screen reader. It knows what these are, and it's a great way to kind of show and hide information or provide a tabbed interface with the right styling. This can also show up as tabs. But here's an example of details where one of the details is open. The summary inside that details element is what's shown when it's closed. And here I'm actually also using a heading inside of that, so it becomes a navigation target for things that are using the headings as an outline of your document. And again, that can enclose, any amount of HTML, can close, tables or here a pre-section, other kinds of tags or other kinds of content. And if the multiple details elements, they also support a name attribute. If they have the same name, then only one of them can be opened at a time. So again, that creates a great accordion kind of interface where you have like a FAQ or something and you want one entry open at a time, uh, or for a settings panel that you can hide. And again, that requires no JavaScript. This is built into modern browsers.
Slide. Tabbed interface.
This is another more advanced example of using details in summary. So this is something that we use in Wisnik, and it's providing a tabbed interface. So here I'm using a grid layout for the summary attribute or for the summary elements inside those details, and putting them, laying them out across so as a row. And then underneath in the second row, I'm putting the actual content that's inside the details. And those content sections actually overlap, but they have a separate Z index depending on whether they're open or not. So the one that's open is on top. The ones that are closed are hidden and underneath it. So they end up occupying the same space on the page. And that's done entirely through CSS. Again, this is a tabbed interface that requires that again, accessibility tools understand how details elements work. And this requires no JavaScript for this interactivity to provide this tabbed interface. There we go. And there's a link here in the slide deck, which I think will be shared to where I got this from. I didn't invent this idea. This is heavily cribbed by searching for how do you do this kind of thing. And you'll find some links in some of these documents here as well.
Slide. Field set and legend. A Wisnik search interface.
Field sets and legends. So again, we have a lot of things where a lot of forms, and field sets are a great way to collect a bunch of form elements into a very nice little settings panel that itself is a block element that you can style and move around or lay out. Yeah, it's just a great way to package these up together. So the legend goes inside the field set, and it's what's shown in that top bar. And then again, you can have any number of form elements inside of it. Again, it's a sharp look, and it works well for navigation. And again, tools know how to deal with, because it's a browser feature, tools know how to deal with this better than, say, trying to replicate this behavior with divs and tons of styling.
Slide. Button and dialog. Configuration command interface options with a tooltip explanation.
Buttons and dialogues. So, one of the things that we have is a tool where the request is when a particular option is selected, that it's going to pop up a message saying, what the caveats of using that particular tool are. In the olden days, you could have a JavaScript alert box pop up, but pop-ups are obviously blocked by browsers by default these days, and it isn't a very user-friendly way to do this kind of thing. So a thing that is now supported or now exists is the dialogue element. So if you see there, you can have a dialogue with an ID, and inside of that, you can have HTML for what's in that dialogue. And then the dialogue itself has a special type of form where instead of posting data, the method is dialogue. And that can have, for example, an OK button, which by default will dismiss the dialogue. Again, and all of that behavior exists without, it's built into the browser, doesn't require JavaScript for interactivity. All you need to do is have a button that sends the command, has an attribute of command for. And there's a couple of different commands here. Show modal, so it'll pop up over the page, and will display that text. So that text doesn't get displayed until that button is pushed, and then a guy's clicking OK or selecting OK and hitting enter will dismiss that pop up. And again, this is entirely using HTML in the page, is a bit more friendly to tools that are parsing the page than trying to do like a JavaScript alert pop-up. And here I've got this integrated with some radio buttons. So again, as you select the radio buttons, it toggles this modal. that can be read.
Slide. Input type text and type search. A WSGMA contact name field with valid and invalid entries.
Okay. Breezing through here. One of my other favorite things that I've gotten a ton of use out of is text input fields, right? If we're doing web applications, much of what we're doing is forms, right? We're having people enter data, filling out forms. That's, the bread and butter of the whole thing. Text input fields now have a bunch of features that are super useful. A lot of people know about, placeholder to put in a little bit of text to give an example of what that field should look like. But we've got, so much other here. So, some of the things that I'm using on here is is the pattern element, which has a JavaScript compatible regular expression that must match for the field to be considered valid. And so that means that field ends up having a CSS attribute or a CSS selector of invalid when it doesn't match. So it's either valid or invalid. So just with CSS styling, you can style that to be, in this case, I'm putting a dash red border around it when the contents are invalid. It will also, if you try to submit when the contents are not valid, when they don't match that validation pattern, that will pop up a little message there with what's in the title of that element, right? So you use title to put in the instructions. That's what accessibility tool is going to read when it's reading that form. It's going to read the title of that form to give the full instructions of how to fill it out. That's also obviously the tooltip if you hover over the form with the mouse. But yeah, so that works really well. It works well with accessibility tools. It works well for most users, and allows you to do a bunch of that input validation client side without requiring JavaScript. To give that first pass that the form is being filled out correctly. If you can describe the contents of what's supposed to be in that form as a regular expression. One of the other things here, again, also is the required attribute. So a number of times the particular forms are required, and it's very common to put a little star and say required after that. But that if you're doing that in the HTML, that's something that could be forgotten. If you do that as the required attribute, it will prevent you from submitting the form without that. If you try to submit the form without that filled out, it's going to actually move the cursor to where that field is and pop up that text. But you can also access that required attribute from CSS. So, one of the favorite things here is in CSS, you can actually target, you can actually add content to how the page is rendered. You can add text. In this case, after the element that is required, then I put in a star required so that will exist on any required form field anywhere in the application without me having to remember to add some special star next to it to hint that that is a required field. So it's consistent, everywhere, and that works very well. It's very maintainable to do it that way.
The bullet point list. HTML code.
And there's again several other kinds of attributes that we use aside from patterns, titles, required. Autofocus. When that page loads, it will take the input and put it to that element. So one element on a page can have the autofocus attribute, and that will it will navigate to that page or to that element, to that form element, as that page loads. Great for search pages where the main feature is a search. Or again, if you're going through a multi-step workflow, just dropping you right into that first form field on that workflow. Autocomplete. So browsers will have built-in autocomplete for form fields, and sometimes you want to either hint that for what kind of autocomplete it should be doing. In this case, this is a username field, so maybe I want to autocomplete with the person's name, so I can hint that to the browser that is the kind of autocomplete I do want in that field. or I want to turn autocomplete off because it's not going to be helpful for it to try and autocomplete this kind of form. And so you can disable it for those form fields, which makes it much more usable. Similar with autocorrect. Uh, Someone's typing on a mobile device and it's trying to autocorrect some technical term to something else entirely. Maybe you just turn autocorrect off for that form field and hint to the browser that it does not need to do that. Yeah, we talked about placeholder a little bit. Later on, we're going to talk about data lists, but text input fields are the main thing that you attach to a data list, which provides a list of options for type ahead search. In addition, text fields, you can also hint that the spell checker in the browser should or should not be active. So it can either do spell checking for that field, or for things that are unlikely to be in the spell check database, you can turn that off. So it doesn't even get the red squiggly and doesn't hint that that something is misspelled. Very useful to just make it easier for people to use. And again, pattern I've talked about here, just regular expression-based validation.
Slide. Input element types for specific data.
Yeah, other kinds of input types. Again, if you're just used to only having like text and numbers, there's a lot in there now. You have input type date, which will actually pop up a little date like calendar widget for people to pick a date from. So if you were having some sort of JavaScript add-on to add a pop-up calendar for picking date fields, that is no longer required. It's a built-in feature of browsers. And that even has special things where you can constrain the date range with min and max. Or if you wanted, say, only Wednesdays to be picked, you could, start on a Wednesday and then have the step be 7 days and constrain the things that the picker will allow. Email will do basic validation that something looks like an email address. Will also, when hinting for autocomplete, will be auto-completing email addresses rather than other text that might go in that field. Of course, you could turn that off. It can also use data lists, and it can also have patterns. So you could restrict to say, at wisc.edu as an email and have it validate that on the client side before even they get to submit the form. Numbers, I think we've used or have existed for a while, but telephone numbers, that's a separate type that exists, and we'll do some basic validation that something looks like a telephone number, as well as URLs, and then text we've talked about.
Slide. Data list. A log output interface with a device selection dropdown showing filtered results.
So my next one here is data list, which I've gotten a heck of a lot of use out of. So data list allows you to create a list of option elements. So it works kind of like, so you set it up kind of like a select form element. But the data list, you give it a set of options, and then you associate that to a text input field, or a couple other types of input fields, but usually text. And it becomes a type ahead search for that text field. So that a person can start typing and then pick from the list to auto-complete that field. Now it still works as a text field, so they could input anything they wanted. They could continue typing and ignore your auto suggestions. So if you're using it like you would use a select to constrain choices, you have to, have reasonable error messages when they put in something that's not correct when they submit. But it's a great way to get people to make appropriate choices, and it works much better with a large list than, say, a select widget would, right? A drop-down list, once you get past 10 or 20 options, is kind of unusable to pan through that, to scroll through that many to find a particular thing. Whereas you can have thousands of options in a data list, and the type ahead search is instant for that. So yeah, data list isn't rendered anywhere in the page. It just has an ID, and then an input element will say which list should feed it. So you could have many input elements that are fed by the same list. For example, if you have the same kind of input for multiple things, you have a location and you have location at 3 different places, you could use one list and have it hint in all those places. We use that for room numbers in show switch, right? The room number list is the same for every port. So I need one data list to in the page, and then I can use that hint list for every place where that hundreds of ports on a device might be hinted by that list. And again, other things like pattern and other things will still apply. Um, so that works really well.
Slide. A subnet search returning too many matches.
Here's an example of a data list that's actually being populated from JavaScript. So this is a type ahead search that isn't completely rendered in the page ahead of time. It is something where the JavaScript is doing a query on the back end and then getting a list of responses, which is populating into that data list. But again, all we need to do here is loop over those responses, create our options, and then that data list is going to continue to work. It's going to be populated. And in this case is also an example of using some places where we are using ARIA attributes specifically. So we've got here this div at the bottom that will hint as to how your type ahead search is going, right? When there's too many responses, we have an error message for that. And a big part of that is setting the role to be status, and then the ARIA live to be polite. There's another, I don't remember the other option for ARIA live, but it's basically whether it interrupts what's currently being read out and waits to the end to make its announcement, or whether it's polite and waits until it's currently done reading the thing before it makes its announcement. But anytime that div changes, anytime the text content of that changes, because it's a status role, it's going to get read out by the screen reader. So they can be typing in the form that's going to be doing the live search, and then as that search returns results or changes the content of the page, the status area is going to both tell, again, a sighted person what's going on, but also has the right attributes so that it gets read out by a screen reader. So that's an accessible way of doing it, and it's pretty straightforward.
Slide. Data attributes with JavaScript form prefilling. A modify WSMIC VLAN interface with a list of VLANs and form fields for VLAN name, description, reason, remarks.
So then here, one of the last things I'm going to talk through are data attributes. So there is a data namespace that's created kind of by standard that is for you to use for whatever you want. So what I've found for some of these tools where maybe you have a bunch of options of things that you want to edit is to take all of the information about that option and actually put it in data attributes on the option element. So here in the modify VLAN page, all of the VLAN options, which might run into the thousands, actually have the name, description, remark, admin list, etc. All of the database fields are rendered as data attributes on the option element itself. So when you select that option, I can go look at that selected option and reconstitute all of those fields. And I use that to preload the form. So when you're modifying something, it's an existing record. So you want to pick that record from a list, and it's going to put those existing entries in the form where you can then edit them and send them on their way. The benefit of this is that I can render this entirely on initial page load without using JavaScript to go do the type ahead search and fill stuff in. I don't need to go make a REST query to the back end. All that is available right from when I was rendering that VLAN list where I needed to look up all this data in the first place. It's all templated out at one shot. So that is a pretty low overhead, pretty quick actually to server-side render that stuff. Doesn't require JavaScript to do anything with it, except for assigning that into the actual form elements when you select something. It doesn't require like a REST call or AJAX or anything like that. So the JavaScript for assigning that is incredibly simple. As here, we've just put an event handler on that select list. And when something is selected, when the input event is fired, we just take that selected option or the first selected option and just assign the value from the data set. into that form value. So here we're assigning the selected VLAN value from the selected VLAN dataset name. Yeah, all of the things that are that are data attributes show up in the JavaScript API in the DOM as under the dataset kind of namespace. So that's just a hash you can just index into and pull values out of. Makes it super easy to do something like this. Very little code, very fast.
Slide. Data attributes with JavaScript filtering.
But there's some places where one of the other things that actually this also allows is doing filtering in the page. So instead of, again, having to do some sort of AJAX thing back to the server to do sorting and filtering, all of the information that you might want to filter on is available on that option element. So here's an example of just doing a keyword search using a regular expression and checking against, the option value, but also a couple of the different data attributes on that option. And then we can enable or disable those rows. And then there's CSS that will say that disabled rows are just not displayed, right? You have a CSS saying if a selection option is disabled, displays none, and it goes away from the list. Again, that happens entirely in the browser. Requires a little JavaScript, but very little. And again, you can also here use the status line. So when you're changing the contents of that list, you want the person who's using it to know that something has changed, that the options have been reduced. So, we can put in a status line, as part of the label for that select list, and fill out that status line with what has actually happened. Person can then read it and know that list has changed and that they can then now navigate to it and find the options they were looking for.
Slide. My new favorite HTML elements.
So that's the whole thing. Kind of all the different elements that I found to be useful that I didn't know existed that are relatively new within the last 10 years. A few others that I didn't have time to go into, but abbreviation for putting a title attribute on to expand abbreviations. Great for a screen reader to read things out. Keyboard for when you're writing documentation with keyboard commands. And then of course we have menus and asides and stuff that you see in the standard UW template. But also I found some use out of meter and progress, which are now HTML elements that give you like a little bar graph or a little progress bar that you can animate or just use as a static thing without needing to load some graphics library to make a PNG to do that kind of thing. And all this documentation comes from the Mozilla HTML reference on developer.mozilla.org. Fantastic resource, highly recommended. And that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for that really interesting, informative, and also really resourceful presentation. Thank you for sharing those resources. I look forward to looking at those when the slides are posted online. If there are any questions that anyone has, you can go ahead and send them in the chat. I will make sure that any questions get sent over to Mark after this. But our next session will begin in about 10 minutes. It is the surprisingly simple tech behind digital cinema and achieving transparency in organizational culture using no-cost automation. So you could pick your favorite. But in the meantime, thank you again to Mark. Thank you again to everyone attending. And if we can get another round of applause for Mark and his awesome presentation.
Slide. University of Wisconsin-Madison logo.
Have a wonderful afternoon.